Welcome to this episode of Stereotypers. I'm Josh,
And I'm Lina.
and we are excited to take you with us on our journey of what inspiring leaders wish they knew before.
Whether you are listening to this podcast on YouTube or Spotify, don't forget to join our LinkedIn group called Stereotypers too.
You can find more insights from our episode and become part of our network yourself. So let's buckle up and dive straight in with today's guest. Our guest today is Krish Dhanam, a renowned motivational speaker from my homeland, India. When he was 6, he remembers looking at the ships in the harbor and dreaming where they were all going and if he would ever get there. In 1986, along with his bride, he moved to the US. He had $9 in his pocket and his MBA degree. He will go on to attend a seminar conducted by the legendary Zig Ziglar, whose group he joined in 91 as a telemarketer and is today the global ambassador of the Ziglar group of companies. His professional speaking career took him to over 50 countries, where he continued to share his experience in sales and communication, presentation skills, habits, the importance of purpose, among half a dozen other topics. I discovered Krish through his talks on goals when I was all of 15, and I watched his video on YouTube so much that I ended up memorizing his lines and applying his advice. He has a blend of humor and poetry in his delivery that add to his expertise in the subject. I joined the Toastmasters Club because Krish was a part of it. I defined my point B because Krish told me that it was important to set goals, and I identified the organizations that would get me there on Krish's advice. All of this has worked out really well for me, and I'm excited to share our conversation with my childhood hero, Krish Dhanam. Thank you for seeing us at 8:30 a.m., Krish. How are you doing today?
I'm doing incredibly well, and your words are humbling. I'm just fascinated that people would listen to what I've been rambling for 30 years.
We have a series of rapid fire questions, 6 of them. We want to see which is the first answer you get, all right? iOS or Android?
iOS,
Mac OS or Windows for your computer?
Mac,
For your personal projects, early morning or late evening?
very early morning.
I saw you online at 4 a.m. today.
What car do you drive? For, yeah. Drive a Nissan.
You're free in a metro ride. Which app do you open first?
Probably LinkedIn.
And which one do you spend maximum time on during your metro ride?
I probably listen to Audible the most.
Which is the last book you listened to on Audible?
The last book I'm listening to right now is G.K. Chesterton's talk on St. Francis of Assisi.
You have a long flight to India ahead of you. The movie system doesn't work. How do you spend your time in the
I usually write and then I read, but I do write a lot. I write at least a half hour every day, and the more time I get, the more I write.
I don't think anyone on the internet knew these things, and now they know it.
So we got you and we got our audience fired up now. We got a lot of speed. Let's take it. The title of this podcast, right? It's Stereotypers, what inspiring leaders wish they knew before. And we will get to this part in a second, but we would love to get to know you and your motivation before that.
Coming clean about the audio quality in this episode. This is the third day I'm wearing the same shirt because the audio was so bad in the recording day for some reason that I had to re-record the important questions. We're working really hard to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Please ignore my poor audio quality. But Krish and Lina, they sound fine. So enjoy the rest of the episode.
As Josh has said, you are a motivational speaker, amongst other things. And I would have the question, what do you do as a motivational speaker if you're not motivated?
Well, my inputs in my life have been so many and have been so consistent that I venture to guess that my down days are better than most people's up days. I don't wait to get demotivated to motivate myself. I put into my mind good, clean, pure things for 30 years. So for having that said, I really have a great reservoir to draw from. Even when I'm down, I use a formula. I've always told people to introduce people to people they couldn't meet on their own, teach them things they couldn't learn on their own, and take them places they couldn't go on their own. And as a result, I just do that. So I go into my arsenal and find that bit of advice, and it does help me.
Nice. And as a result, you've joined our podcast. Being among young people, Josh and I have just entered the corporate world. And what you look out if you want to identify yourself with is job descriptions. That's the way it works in most of the situations today. So if someone would ask you, Krish, what are you actually doing? What would your job description be? Like, not the title, but what are you doing on a daily basis?
That's a great question because it was asked of others that I admired, and their answer is the one I'll give you. At any given time in my life, I'm making memories, so I try to make them good ones.
Oh, wow. How does making memories in that job look like during a pandemic? Is it any different?
Not really, because I built the studio right before the pandemic started. And when the pandemic hit, I wrote down on the wall in front of me, if you're going to be effective, you better become uncomfortable, because everybody is going to be comfortable in front of their screen.
Wow, yeah.
So I made a promise that whoever asked me in the world, I would reach them real time on the time they needed, not the time that was good to me because I was the expert. So I was encouraging people at 2 a.m, my time here, while it was afternoon where they were already uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And that led to a new discipline and more business.
Absolutely agree. I mean, let's get to the key part. You have loads of experience, right? Are there any things that you wish you knew before when you were a young professional? Or do you think you just learned them at the right time? What would you say?
We all have regrets, but if the outcome of life where I am now is very good, the late great Billy Graham was once asked that. He says, I like where I am, so I wouldn't go back and change anything. But along the way, I would have done something strategically better to get where I am quicker. So the very goals Josh was talking about, I wish I had known them when I was 10 and 12, struggling because I was in a small town without hope. I wish someone had come and told me what I was told at 30 when I was 15. I don't think I would have got where I am quicker because I probably would have made more of the same mistakes. But I like where I am, so I won't change anything.
Maybe a key learning for you, something that you've discovered. It's not from a regret point of view, but just a little pearl of wisdom. For me, one of those things that has been a very eye-opening learning was from Dale Carnegie's How to Influence and Influence People. When you're visiting someone's home, even if he's wrong and you know it, stop humiliating him. I had to learn that the hard way because I wanted to be the right guy who's always right. So something like that, that's true for you, that you've learned along the way?
Yeah, the one thing I have learned along the way is that yesterday did end with last night, and today is the first day of your rest of your life. Coming from India, I was raised in a shame culture. I was always told that my performance would determine my outcome. I'm one of those rare breed of people who's never been to school in America except to teach. I was a below average, underperforming student with 2 honorary doctorates now. So life has its way of rewarding you, but I would go back to the basics that just because you hold your breath, the universe does not suffocate. Life goes on.
When I was reading about you online, so many of the sources talk about this MBA. So which MBA did you have, and did it help you to get the ground running when you got to the USA?
Now it's a top 10 school. I went to IMT in Ghaziabad because it's the only school I could get into without an entrance test. But today it's now a top 10 school in India, and I was recognized as one of their distinguished alumni of the last 25 years. I think the only reason I went to get the MBA there was because that's where I met my bride of now. Today actually is my 36th anniversary.
Yes, I saw it on Instagram. Congratulations on that.
I saw it on LinkedIn, I think. Congratulations. I mean, I think the topic of, having an MBA going to a high-class school is a very interesting one. I mean, Josh and I also came from a bigger school in France, but there are some discussions around the relevancy of this, right? Because they say what you need in the future to succeed is not what you needed in the past. And it's less about skills and hard knowledge, but it's more about the soft skills and your network, actually. And so there is some discussions about what is the relevancy of this. I understand in the past it was different, but when you look at, successful people surrounding you, what is it that makes them successful? Like, realistically speaking, is having an MBA part of this, or is it something completely different?
It'll get you in the door. It's not a bad thing. It's always a relevant point because you don't have to start from 0. You can start with 5. Fred Smith, a legendary motivator, once said that everybody in this world doesn't have a right to have a degree. but nobody in this world should have a right not to have an education. And you have to be a constant student. I think I've learned more after my MBA, but it has helped me in the discussion, because when I talk about the perils of the education system, I don't come across as someone like sour grapes because I do have a degree. I come from a very educated family. My brother's an engineer. I've got a master's. My wife has a master's. My son is a mechanical engineer. My dad got his PhD at the age of 83, and my mother finished her master's at the age of 77. So if anybody can talk about the perils of education, I can, because I come from an educated family. So it does help the argument. You can go, it'd be better to have an MBA and talk about its uselessness than not have it and gripe.
There's actually a very interesting book on this. It's called Outliers by, I think, Malcolm Gladwell, and it talks about what role this plays. So this is certainly part of the equation, but what other components are there to the equation?
The other component to it is if you surround yourself by people who are lifters. Emerson said, if you're going to pull me up, you better be on higher ground. So regardless of education, you always have to be a higher ground thinker, not trying to push against the grain, but pulling people from where they are to where they need to be. I tell people the best way to the top is not looking at the mountaintop, but looking back to where you came from, bringing enough people to where you are, and on their shoulders, they'll take you to the mountaintop. So the old adage of leadership is still the most important one, that ultimately success is about influence, yours. So I've narrowed it down to 2 words. If you want the simplest answer I can give you is this: your life success will depend on 2 things: reputation and affiliation. Your reputation will determine your affiliation. Your affiliation will determine your reputation. You work on both of those every day, and you don't need anything else.
So when you came to USA back in the day, it was 86, right? At that point, you had $9 in your pocket. What were your avenues like? What were you looking at? Was there a job? Was there a rent paid off? What were you looking at?
My wife, she was in America and came to India to get married to me. She was laid off from her job while she was in India. So when we got here, we had about $200 in marriage money that had come here, because all the money we got in India, we had to leave in India. She started off with an unemployment benefit of a couple of $100 a week. I waited $20 and I got a job working as an assistant to a stockbroker on minimum wage. And that was the only avenue. Sales has always been my get, because of the fact that in sales, if you're good at it, you write your own ticket. It's always the easiest working, most lucrative, or the hardest working, most frustrating. And I'm glad I'm a salesman, because I can sell my way out of a paper bag.
So yeah, the MBA experience, of course, was rich for you. And when you came in, the avenues were not so shiny.
No, because it's
during the contest.
Most of what we learn in academia is theoretical. They give you case studies, but you're not part of them. They talk about economies, but you've never experienced them. They talk about highs, lows, and departments and structure, but you're not in them. So the only thing in the world that is worth more secondhand is experience. So you got to get it somewhere. And my MBA helped me realize that whatever I was doing was just what I was doing. It was not who I am. That when I did get to the position of influence, I had the academia to back it up. But before the academic prowess that you have in college catches up with your position of hierarchy, there is that learning curve. And it's usually in the valley where most people fail. And the best advice I got was, the food you eat on the mountaintop only grows in the valley. Nothing grows on the mountaintop.
Krish, I think you just perfectly outlined the idea of this whole podcast. It's exactly, literally, Josh and I had brainstorming sessions about how to phrase this, but we call it the experience gap, right? You learn a lot at school and it's important and you build your network, but at the same time, you go into the corporate world and you don't even know how to end your email. This was my case. You write an email, it takes you 4 hours, and how do you end it? So it's the simplest things that slow you down a lot in the beginning. And some of these learnings you have to make yourself, some of these mistakes you have to make yourself. But a lot of things you can also share with others. And this is exactly the idea that we have behind this podcast, to bridge this experience gap and kind of also cover this new dynamic that the job market is developing. It's, people don't really care about your CV anymore. They do, it's part of the process, but they care more about what your story is, the fact that, you've played soccer in your life, you failed here, you've learned that, and this is more what it is about nowadays. And this is why Josh and we've experienced that this dynamic is still a bit broken, and it's tough for young people to get used to this new situations. The corporate world is a bit lagging behind sometimes, and this is why we're doing this podcast, to try to bridge this and connect the experience of professional and experienced people like you, plus the network. So also kind of, build a network around this. So yeah, couldn't have said better.
One of the things that I wish to start more often is that job security is a thing of the past. Employment security is a thing of the future. It is not your skill that is going to get you to the top. It is your will to constantly believe in the skill you have. Harvard University did a study some years ago, and they said in 85% of the cases, you get a job, keep a job, and move ahead in that job, it's because of your attitude and not your skill. And so, yeah, only 15% is because of your skill. And you do need skill, but you need skill and will in order to make a difference. And sometimes when we come through the quantitative aspects of life, we put too much weight in what we do and very less on who we are. And as a result, the combination of those two, because again, as you mentioned earlier, the goal is to have fun. A job, in my mind, stands for just over broke. If someone else is giving you a salary, you have already told yourself that you have allowed someone else to determine your cap on your ability. They are giving you your net worth. Now, when people ask me what is the key to success, I said, make sure that your streams of income exceed your streams of imagination. I came up to the decision that I was going to have at least 7 or 8 different ways in which I would earn a living. And if 3 or 4 of them choked up, the other 3 would perform. So that, going to a job and thinking that, you're going to rise in that job because of dental benefit and mental benefit, then you're putting all your eggs on someone else's agenda.
Although it's just 15%, for me, the skills that I watch in you, just the hook in the beginning of a talk, I've seen your hook over and over again, and it's just it's impossible to look away. So just dwelling with those skills for a second, the skills that you operate in, they are quite similar to the ones that were sharpened by the sophists back in their wake. So where do you draw the line in this persuasive rhetoric, given that the sophists have this advantage to slide in any message they want under that hook? So where do you draw the line with that?
Yeah, talking about the hook, when you know why anyhow will do, why becomes formulaic. We're obsessed with the how-to culture. Give me 7 pills, 8 steps, 9 shrinks, and 4 therapists. Those are all how-to. How-to is behavior driven. When you know why, formulaic, anyhow will do. And as a result of it, you have to understand one very simple concept. Other people can tell you what you can or cannot be, only you can fulfill it. So, I tell people that if you want to simplify existence, understand there are only 2 kinds of people who excel when they walk into a room. One is a person who walks in, maverick, takes over. I try to be that person. I walk in with the charisma. I don't worry about the environment, whether I'm in Albania or I'm in sub-Saharan Africa. I don't look at the small kid from a small town in India. I walk in and say, here I am. That's maverick thinking. The second also works, that of Mother Teresa, Florence Nightingale, there you are. One is I'm going to take charge. The other is I'm going to listen. And because I listen to you, you're going to allow me to be in charge. Outside of those 2, you're a spectator. So I'm just like, you either walk in and own it, or you walk in and tell them I deserve to own it. But otherwise, you're going to be clapping for others. You're going to be in the audience.
Deep. So, but do you see that there is this almost malevolent evil possible with the skill that you operate in? I'm making no accusations here, but is there some place that you draw a line?
Yeah, because one thing is for certain, you can never make a good deal with a bad person. So you can have all the charisma in the world and all the belief in the world and the greatest goods in the world. But here's you asked the line in the sand. When I put my head on the pillow at night, if I know that it is from a good point, I will fall asleep. If I know in my heart that I've gone against my conscience, I'm going to stay awake all night trying to convince my conscience it needs to change its mind because I like the deal. And so the sleep is the most important attribute, whether it's 4 or 5 hours. Can you sleep believing that you made a difference, that somebody is glad you passed this way? For me, last night, at the end of the day, I was exhausted, jet lag, and I look at your LinkedIn and I looked at my bride and I said, I don't even know when I impacted this person. He's calling me his hero, which means someday in the past, I was consistent. That's all. And I think that word will allow you to succeed. Are you consistent every day? Mm. And I can tell you this, for 30 years, I've been consistent. With integrity, you have nothing to fear because you have nothing to hide. I don't live my life looking over my shoulder because I've not defrauded or hurt anybody.
Looking back, if you look at your values, integrity, and these things, it's something that I share too, but you only realize the value of staying consistent looking back. And once you've made this experience, it's easier to stay consistent in the future. But I think this is something that especially young people have to learn, especially to think long-term and not short-term. Is it really worth, taking a cut on one of my values just to have short-term, opportunities, for example? By the way, I'm terribly sorry about the background noise. I'm in Spain and people are doing a lot of things.
But siesta. When I was in Madrid teaching, they would cut off at about 3 in the afternoon and they wouldn't come back till about 6. I went to do a 3-day workshop and they made it 5 days because they had to take a nap.
Well, that's where siesta comes from.
Siesta, good food. I love Spanish mentality, I have to say. And actually, there's a church right next to me. And yesterday I was sitting here, they were playing music and it was very nice. But for recording a podcast, well, we'll have to live with it. It's authentic, right? It's authentic. But what I was going to say, so I think this was one key learning for me, that you have, especially when it comes to your values, you have to think long term and don't make any compromise ever, even though it might not pay off in the short term. There might be job opportunities, there might be whatever opportunities in life, but you need to feel comfortable with it, and it needs to be yourself. And sometimes it's hard to say no to things, but you learn over time that it's absolutely worth. Clayton Christensen calls this marginal thinking. So, if you just once don't give 100%, but 99%, then this 1% that you didn't give at that time will make it so much easier for you in every other upcoming situation to also not give 100%, but 99%. So quit marginal thinking, either do 100%, stick to your values, stick to your beliefs, or don't do it at all, because this 1% that you don't give will harm you more than, anything.
Dennis Waitley was a naval aviator. When talking about values, he gave this quote, which I first embraced about 35 years ago. He said, value is in the doer, not the deed. Intrinsic value that you bring to whatever you do. Now, when he wrote Psychology of Achievement, it's a book that literally helped me in the early days of my career. He rewrote it after 40 years, and I was one of the people he asked for an endorsement. And I was thinking to myself how far I've come that I would wear out the cassette of Dennis Waitley's Psychology of Achievement and quote him ad nauseum, that 40 years later, that value is in the doer, not the deed, came true, because I was asked for an endorsement and I got an autographed copy saying, thank you for living accurately that which we have been preaching. And I thought it was quite, it does come full circle. But here's the thing I teach young people all the time. I said, unless you're willing to play the long game, and the long game doesn't have to be long. Mr. Ziglar asked me, he says, will you give me 10 years to challenge every assumption you've ever held dear, and I will make you a superstar? I had to be willing to do it. And it took 11 years, but now when I look back, it was worth it.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that consistency is one of the most important ingredients for you. I think that's also how I'm trying to operate. And I see that Lina does it too. Lina and I shared a very brief moment in school, but even with this podcast planning and stuff, we're going somewhere with this. But it's really nice to hear from you, Krish.
Yeah, I can't wait to see the success you have. And, someday down the road, I'll be glad that I was on it.
Well, you're certainly one of the leaders lifting us to a higher ground then. We can already say this. So
no problem. Anything I can do to help you, reach out. And if you need other people to come on, I have my network of people is, I wrote a book called Hardheaded Softhearted with the former president of Microsoft, Rick Belluzzo. Rick was knighted by the Italian government. These are great people to have because they've built impressive careers, but started with nothing. And it doesn't always have to be a rags to riches, but it could be generational. It could be legacy. The one thing I'm really proud of is I've never lost my Indianness. I've lived in the West most of my life, but I'm very well recognized in India for the very simple reason that people in India are proud that I never denigrated my origin. I always used it as a foundation. So,
yeah, I saw that in your videos. You used it as a source of pride and strength, and that was stunning. And I got the message immediately. I do have one last question that comes to the topic of motivation and purpose. Actually, you see it everywhere nowadays. Corporations want to be purposeful. Young people want to be purposeful with what they do. But then you, in one of your videos, I learned from the videos. This is scalable experience that you're creating through the videos, right? You see it even reaches Barcelona. So you said, like, how do you get people to not forget their purpose when they enter the car and leave work? And how do you kind of centralize this beyond even work and make it a foundation through all life? And this, I was reminded of a book that I read. It's Coffee at the Edge of the World, and it's about how people find the purpose of existence. And if they find it and they manage to link it to what they do in the job, and they manage to link it to what they do in life, this is the ultimate source of happiness. But finding this purpose of existence, why are you actually alive? What is it that makes you thrive beyond just salary? That's maybe something, but it goes even deeper, like many layers below this. And then you said this in that how do you get people to not forget their motivation when they enter the car and leave their job? What would be your secret to success for that?
Yeah, I think the principle you're alluding to is the fact that don't just sit there to get there, sit there to arrive more informed. So my purpose when I sit in the car is always destination. When I get into the car in the morning, I say, okay, I'm going to be on a podcast. In a short while, I'm going to be talking to a company that is getting ready to book me for the 6th or 7th time. And I need to bring something different. So I always learn what is required where I'm about to arrive. So I'll posit that information on the way home, like this today. I'm supposed to go back around noon. My wife and I are going for a quiet lunch somewhere. But what I'll do is on the way home, on the way there, I'll try to listen to information and advice and communication and something, whatever it is. But the principle here is don't just sit there to get there, sit there to arrive more informed. The people at your destination are getting keener, are you? So I never arrive at an appointment. I always arrive earlier than anybody else. I've maintained that record for 35 years. I've never been late for an appointment. It gives me great joy. Even in the country of Albania, someone said, our pickup time is 2:30, which we know for you means 2:20. I'll always be downstairs. My goal in life is not to have anybody wait on me. And if I don't have anybody wait on me, I never have to begin with an apology. I can hit the ground running.
5 Minuten vor der Zeit is the deutsche Pünktlichkeit.
Wow. Yes. That was in German. Yeah.
5 minutes of coming before time is the German punctuality.
This punctuality is actually a very cultural topic. And it's perceived very different in different countries. And being German, George knows me by now. I can
2 minutes before Lina's
relate.
online.
But this was such a huge experience. Thank you very much. And I'm sure we will have to re-listen to this episode, because all the things you said, it takes, I think, another 12 weeks to process them, but very valuable. Thank you very much, Chris.
And that's the only piece of advice I'll give you. Don't speak in long narratives, because we are now in an app world. And this is the retraining, Joshua, that I did. I used to be a narrative communicator, but I'm now a machine gunner, because I know that people are going to hear something and I want them to stop at some point. But if you go too long, they'll go to another app, because most apps will give you 3 clicks before they charge you, and you need to be a 3-click communicator.
Is that something you learned this year? Or
the last 5 or 7 years, when apps started becoming famous, I realized the attention span of people was going down. And then I realized every app I downloaded, after 3 things, they asked me for money. And then I realized that unless the first 3 things they said made sense, I never bought it. So let me be the kind of person who will be remembered after the first 3 things I say.
Thank you for your time, Krish.
All right.
It's been a privilege. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Have a nice day, Chris. Bye-bye.
Bye. Good meeting you, Lina. Bye-bye.
Yes, you too.
Thank you guys for tuning in today. Stereotypos is so much more than just a podcast, so don't forget to join our LinkedIn group called Stereotypos, where you can find even more content, network with our speakers and other inspirational career starters. You'll also find the video versions of our podcast on YouTube. All links in the description. Stay tuned for the next episode and see you around.